Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And it's finally time to paint Rotigus the Great Unclean on the channel. I say finally because this is featured in the background of quite a few videos now, including last week's video on easy quick wet blending, which I will be referencing a few times in this video, and I'll drop a link down below if you want to see a video on wet blending. And this paint scheme is very inspired by the official box art. I don't normally do, I normally veer quite a way away from box art, but I like the box art enough with a few tweaks to make it fit into my army and my own kind of personal style. Now we're going to do a lot of contrast paint in this video. So we've started off by spraying the model black and then doing a zenithal spray of wraithbone. Now zenithal just from the top at a 45-degree angle, and you're leaving little bits of that sort of darker undercoat showing through from underneath, and it adds to the shades and highlights. Now I said about contrast paint, what I'm taking here is the contrast medium, and I'm putting that in to the actual Rakarth flesh colour that we're going to start the base tones of this model off with. You could just paint it on just normally, but it's quite a thick paint, and I wanted it to be a little bit paler than it would normally come out, because again the Rotigus model has got a very pale skin tone when you look at the sort of official box art. So mixing in that contrast medium, one, makes it quicker to do, it flows a lot easier across the model, you'll use less actual paint, but two, it sort of makes a slightly paler effect on that skin, and that's what I'm going for, quite a pale base coat as we get into that model. Now when I was painting, I was really deciding what colour to do the tentacles and things that are coming out. Now Workshop, I've got them doing that kind of pale skin and then ending in blue. I'm going to do the ends different, you've already seen that kind of pinky colour, but I've put the same contrast paint mix down to sort of 3/4 of the tentacles to come back to later. You can see the ends have been left white. Now it's real simple, getting into leather, so this is a snakebite leather contrast onto the kind of cowl that he has, and also onto the flap that's kind of around the back as his sort of skirt he's kind of wearing, I suppose you'd call it. So it's going to be using contrast paint and standard paints in this. You could just use a standard leather colour on this if you wanted to, but I find actually the speed of the contrast is good, and it's quite a pale colour that we're going for, because again a very pale colour scheme that they've gone for overall on this model, rather than the really dark normally that they would put on the Great Unclean ones. Now into the bleach bone, fair bit of bone and teeth on here. What's nice about the Rotigus belly is this is a kind of nice open sort of gnashing maw, so opportunity to do something different around there later. So onto the teeth on the belly, and this is a standard bleach bone paint. So the teeth, belly, the mouth, and you've got to give him a good manicure, so onto his toes and the fingers on his hands. And it's very, very close colours so far. You know, these kind of things are all very, very similar in tones, so but they do stand out quite more significantly in the flesh. Now, contrast paint again, moving into, I'm using Maggots purple into all the mouth area, but also all the sort of broken fleshy bits all around the model, and there are quite a lot of these. Now, I am doing it onto the kind of borderline between the flesh and the kind of mouth area, but we'll come back to that later, because you'll notice at the start of the video that was in two different colours. Now, you could leave it all just one, and that would be fine. Went for a bit of difference. Now this is the part where the wet blending comes in. The actual model, again, we've got an official scheme, kind of a brown leading into a green colour on the end of that staff. Don't be intimidated wet blending, it's not that difficult. Full video, I'll link down below on the channel, where I take a few more minutes to explain the process. But essentially you put in this green contrast paint across the top, this Plague Bearer flesh, and then using a wildwood colour and putting that underneath the green and moving it into the green paint, and then it will merge and blend together, and that's it, literally wet blending as we go, working that all the way through the rest of that staff, as you can see here. Now, this is when I've decided I wasn't 100% happy with that mouth and the split flesh area, so I've taken Volupus pink and put that around the margins of where we've done the previous Maggots purple. Don't be afraid of changing your schemes halfway through if you're not quite happy how it's working out. And now it's the next wet blending stage. So here we're taking the Screamer pink colour, and we're using that again into a wet blend with normal paints this time rather than with the contrast paint. And again, video last week goes into a bit more detail, but essentially you're taking the bright colour that you want on the end of the tentacle, then taking the pale colour the flesh is made up of, not mixed with contrast medium this time, just pure paint, putting it into the dark paint area, drawing that down the tentacle, going back out, getting the pale colour again, and then starting in that lighter pink that's been created, and then putting that paint on and drawing that down part of the tentacle. So wet blending in a nutshell, slightly longer video last week, don't be afraid of it. And again, to point out, I picked to do pink rather than blue because I just didn't like the blue that the Rotigus colour scheme officially has. So inspired by the official colour scheme, but not exactly matching it. Okay, taking now a yellow, which is the colour I use on all of my Death Guard and Nurgle, sort of represent the pustules and everything, so a deep yellow from Vallejo into all those kind of pustules and things that are pushing around the body. And this provides a nice contrast to the pale flesh that we've got going on everywhere else, and will be a brilliant base coat to the final kind of Nurgle effect we're going to do. Now, you'll see I've put that maggots purple into the mouth where those sort of maggots and things are pouring out from. Wasn't quite, again, happy with how it was. I liked it as a base tone. Taking Genestealer purple, which is a lovely layer paint, and painting that onto all the sort of maggoty areas all around the model. And they are in lots and lots of the gaps and cracks of the model, so kind of keep your eye out. Metallic stage now. Retributor armour, didn't get much footage of that for some reason. The model was off camera quite a lot, so onto all the little brass areas around the model, and there are a few kind of around the staff and sticking out of his skin. You've got a couple of little bells. Then taking a gunmetal colour onto the chainmail at the back. Not a lot of armour on this model, so only a couple of areas of metallics, which is why, again, starting off with a pale base coat works. Whereas if you watch my channel a lot, you know I do a lead belcher base coat virtually all the time on my models. Now, this is another difference in how I would paint the vast majority of my Death Guard. This is a Seraphim Sepia shade from Games Workshop. If you watch the channel a lot, you know I do generally a Vallejo wash, which is a very dirty, mucky wash, which works brilliantly for Death Guard. But Rotigus is a little bit brighter, a little bit paler than that sort of wash would lend to. So a lighter, gentler wash helped in this next stage. And now it's going back over the colours and highlighting up. So what I'm taking now is the exact same colour that we made that initial contrast wash with. So taking the Rakkar flesh and really edge highlighting, taking it off a wet palette so it's not super thick paint, and just putting that layer on the very, very top. Now it's thin layers where there's the folds and ridges, that's nice and easy, whereas you've got big flat areas of flesh like this. It's very kind of watered down paint, so it's not quite a wash, but just taking it off your wet palette and spreading that paint out so it kind of gives just a very thin layer. And you can see here, you see the multiple tones now building around the belly where the wash has gone on, and just the level of sort of that edge highlighting and putting the next paint when we're doing. We want to be showing the ink wash in the gaps and cracks and crevices, if that hopefully makes sense. Easier to see on the bone, so doing the same thing, highlighting the bone layer with, again, a very, very thin layer of paint going on there, taken off a wet palette that's been on there for, you know, quite a few hours, probably a couple of days by this point. So it is quite watered down, and we're just wanting it to just to drop on the very raised areas so that we're not overwhelming the colours on there, but you can see all the prior layers. Now this is something I do actually on a lot of the flesh on my Death Guard anyway, but going a little bit heavier than I normally would, because again the official box art of Rotigus has a very green tinge around the kind of mouth area and all the splits. So we're just taking a Beeltan green shade, putting it on directly onto the areas bordering that kind of mouth area, spreading it around a little because I didn't want it super vibrantly green, but just spreading it till I'm kind of happy that it's given a really nice greeny tinge kind of around the mouth and all the split flesh areas. And again, that's a direct kind of copy of the essence of what they were doing on that box art. Just a little bit of Nylak oxide now onto the metallic, onto the brass rather, because obviously the brass oxidizes whereas metal rusts. It's a lovely paint, this one to use as an extra. And now onto the paint that every Nurgle and Death Guard player should be using, which is a Nurgle's Rot, absolute essential sort of technical paint. And we're putting that onto the pustules and then we're dragging it down the flesh side. So it looks like these pustules are weeping that Nurgle's Rot down across the flesh and across onto the belly. Every Nurgle player should be using this paint. It is fantastic. And again, the colours I've used across this model will tie it in very much to the rest of my army, whilst being a little bit different, but it would be because it's a demon. Final touches, some blood for the blood god and the teeth. Love an opportunity to pull this technical paint out and just get that really nice final effect, and I have just used it around the teeth. You could put it on wider areas of the model if you wanted to. So that's kind of it. I hope the spin throughs give you more of a detail about actually where these colours have gone, because obviously it's easy to say on all the fleshy bits, so watch this bit around. I really like the final effect. It will tie into my Death Guard army very, very close to the colour scheme, but not exact, and very close to the kind of official Games Workshop scheme for this model, but not exact. So putting my own twist on it, making it similar to my army, but slightly different. So again, I'm going to do a whole demon army at some point, I'm sure. So if you like that, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I'll see you in another video.